Imagine sitting down to a lavish feast, surrounded by the finest delicacies, but before you take a single bite, someone else is tasting each dish, risking their life with every mouthful. This wasn't a scene from a Hollywood movie, but a chilling reality for some of history's most powerful figures. Welcome to the secretive and dangerous world of poison tasters, where every meal was a gamble, and every bite could be the last. Stick around, because we're about to uncover the true stories behind these unsung heroes, their harrowing experiences, and the lengths they went to protect their rulers. Trust me, by the end of this, you'll never look at your dinner the same way again. In royal courts, poison wasn't a fear, it was an everyday expectation. In royal courts, poison wasn't a fear, it was an everyday expectation. The threat of poisoning was so prevalent that it shaped the very culture and protocols of these elite circles. For instance, in ancient China, emperors employed specialized officials known as poison tasters or food testers. These individuals would sample the emperor's food and drink before it reached the royal table. Their role was crucial, as it provided a first line of defense against potential assassination attempts. The practice wasn't limited to China. Similar roles existed in other royal courts across the world, reflecting a universal concern for the safety of rulers. The constant threat of poisoning led to the development of elaborate rituals and precautions. In some courts, multiple tasters were employed to ensure that no single individual could be bribed or coerced into allowing poison to pass. The tasters themselves were often chosen from the lower ranks of the court, as their lives were considered expendable compared to those of the nobility. This hierarchy underscored the harsh reality of royal life, where trust was a luxury that few could afford. The taster's duties extended beyond mere tasting. They were also responsible for observing the preparation of food and drink, ensuring that no tampering occurred during the process. The psychological impact of this constant vigilance was profound. Rulers and their families lived in a state of perpetual suspicion, where every meal was a potential trap. This paranoia wasn't baseless. History is replete with examples of poisonings that succeeded despite such precautions. The fear of poisoning also influenced the types of foods and drinks consumed by the royalty. Dishes that were difficult to poison, such as those that were heavily spiced or cooked thoroughly, were preferred. Additionally, the use of antidotes and counterpoisons was common, with many rulers carrying small vials of supposed antidotes with them at all times. The role of poison tasters was not just about physical protection, it also served a symbolic purpose. Their presence was a constant reminder of the fragility of power and the lengths to which enemies would go to undermine it. This symbolism was not lost on the courtiers and subjects, who understood the precarious nature of their ruler's position. The tasters, in a way, became a part of the royal mythology, embodying the dual themes of loyalty and vulnerability. Their existence was a testament to the complex interplay of trust, fear, and power that defined royal courts throughout history. To protect rulers, special servants known as tasters ate every dish before it reached the throne. In many ancient and medieval societies, the role of a taster was a grim but necessary job. These individuals were tasked with sampling the ruler's food and drink before it was served, acting as a human shield against potential poisoning. The practice was rooted in a time when political intrigue and assassination attempts were common. Tasters were often slaves, low-ranking servants, or even condemned prisoners. Their lives were expendable, making them ideal candidates for this dangerous duty. The ruler's safety was paramount, and the taster's role was a stark reminder of the constant threats that surrounded those in power. The process of tasting was not as straightforward as it might seem. Tasters had to be observant and quick. They would take small portions of each dish and consume them in the presence of the ruler. If the taster showed any signs of illness or distress, the food was immediately discarded. This required a keen eye and a strong stomach, as the taster had to remain composed even in the face of potential death. The ruler would then wait to see if the taster succumbed to any poison. If the taster remained unharmed, the food was deemed safe for the ruler to consume. This method was far from foolproof, but it provided a layer of protection in an era where trust was scarce. Tasters were not always willing participants in this deadly game. Many were forced into the role through coercion or as a punishment. Their lives were often short and brutal. However, some tasters managed to gain favor and rise through the ranks. They might be rewarded with better living conditions or even freedom if they proved their loyalty and skill. Despite the risks, the job offered a unique opportunity for social mobility. It was a grim lottery, where luck and timing could mean the difference between a swift death and a chance at a better life. The role of the taster was a stark reminder of the harsh realities of life in a world where power was everything. Some tasters were slaves. others were elite professionals trained to detect toxins. The practice of employing poison tasters has a long and varied history, with the roles of these individuals differing greatly depending on the society and time period. In some cultures, tasters were slaves, forced into this dangerous role with little choice in the matter. For instance, in ancient Rome, slaves were often tasked with tasting the food and drink of their masters to ensure it wasn't poisoned. This was a grim reality of their lives, as they faced the constant risk of death with each meal they sampled. The life expectancy of these slaves was understandably low, and their roles were seen as disposable, reflecting the harsh hierarchies of the time. On the other hand, there were societies where poison tasters were highly trained professionals, held in high esteem for their expertise. These elite tasters underwent rigorous training to develop their senses, particularly their sense of taste and smell. They were often employed by royalty, nobility, or other high-ranking officials who were at risk of poisoning. In some cases, these professionals were so skilled that they could detect even the slightest traces of toxins in food or drink. Their training involved learning about various poisons, their sources, and their effects on the body. This knowledge allowed them to identify potential threats quickly and accurately. The contrast between slave tasters and professional tasters highlights the differing values and practices of various societies. While slave tasters were often seen as expendable, professional tasters were valued for their skills and knowledge. This distinction also reflects the broader societal attitudes towards labor and expertise. In some cultures, the role of a poison taster was so important that it was passed down through generations, with families specializing in this dangerous profession. These families would train their children from a young age, ensuring that the knowledge and skills were preserved and passed on. This created a sense of pride and tradition around the role, despite the inherent risks. Ancient Persia even had rotation protocols to reduce the chance of an entire team being poisoned. In the grand scheme of royal protection, ancient Persia had a rather clever system in place. They understood that having the same group of people taste test the king's food every day would be a risky business. If a particularly cunning assassin managed to poison the entire batch, the king would be left without his loyal tasters and, more importantly, without his life. So, they came up with something called rotation protocols. These protocols were essentially a schedule that ensured different groups of tasters took turns. It was like a shift system, but with much higher stakes. One group would test the food one day, and a different group the next. This way, even if a batch of food was poisoned, it wouldn't wipe out the entire tasting team. It was a simple yet effective strategy to minimize risk. Plus, it gave each group a bit of a break, knowing they wouldn't have to put their lives on the line every single day. The rotation also helped to maintain a sense of fairness. It prevented any one group from feeling overly burdened or resentful. After all, tasting the king's food was a dangerous job, and no one wanted to do it all the time. By rotating, they ensured that the responsibility was shared equally. It was a practical solution that kept the tasters happy and the king safe. Rome's tasters used silver tools because they believed metal would react to deadly substances. In ancient Rome, the use of silver tools by food tasters was rooted in a fascinating blend of superstition and practicality. The belief was that silver, being a reactive metal, would change color or taste if it came into contact with poison. This idea stemmed from the observation that silver can tarnish when exposed to certain substances, such as sulfur compounds. While not all poisons would react with silver, the Romans thought it was a reliable way to detect potential threats. This practice was not just about the metal itself but also about the rituals and beliefs surrounding it. The tasters would use silver utensils, cups, and even plates, hoping that any poison would reveal itself before the food or drink reached the emperor or other high-ranking officials. The concept of using silver as a poison detector was not entirely baseless. Some poisons, particularly those containing sulfur or other reactive chemicals, could indeed cause silver to darken or develop a patina. For example, arsenic, a common poison at the time, could react with silver under certain conditions. However, many other poisons would not trigger any visible reaction. This meant that the method was far from foolproof. Despite its limitations, the practice persisted because it provided a sense of security and ritualistic reassurance. The tasters and their superiors likely understood that silver was not a guaranteed safeguard, but it was better than nothing in a world where poisoning was a very real threat. The use of silver tools also had a psychological impact. The mere presence of these utensils could deter potential poisoners, knowing that their actions might be detected. This psychological warfare was an important aspect of the tasting process. The tasters themselves were often slaves or low-ranking individuals. chosen because their loss would be less significant than that of the person they were protecting. The silver tools became a symbol of both protection and vulnerability. They represented the lengths to which the powerful would go to ensure their safety, as well as the risks faced by those tasked with ensuring it. In a way, the silver tools were a physical manifestation of the power dynamics and fears of the time. Many tasters were rewarded with land, wealth, or noble status if they survived long enough. The practice of employing poison tasters was not just a grim necessity but also a pathway to potential wealth and status. Those who survived their duties often found themselves rewarded handsomely. Land grants were a common reward, providing tasters with a stable source of income and a place to settle down. Wealth in the form of gold, silver, or other valuables was also bestowed upon those who proved their worth. In some cases, tasters were elevated to noble status, a significant leap from their previous station in life. This elevation came with privileges, influence, and a higher standing in society. However, the path to such rewards was fraught with danger, as the taster's life hung in the balance with every meal. The rewards were not just about material gains. They also included social recognition and respect. A taster who survived multiple meals could gain a reputation for being particularly skilled or lucky. This reputation could open doors to better opportunities and higher social circles. For instance, a taster who consistently identified poisoned food might be invited to dine with high-ranking officials or even the ruler themselves. This exposure could lead to further rewards and a more comfortable life. The potential for such recognition and respect was a powerful motivator for many tasters. However, the rewards were not guaranteed. The taster's life was always at risk, and many did not live long enough to enjoy their rewards. Those who did survive often had to navigate complex social dynamics. Accepting rewards could come with strings attached, such as loyalty oaths or expectations of continued service. For example, a taster who received land might be expected to provide military service or other favors in return. Despite these challenges, the potential for land, wealth, and noble status was a significant incentive for many to take on the dangerous role of poison taster. Some kings faked poison threats to test loyalty, making the job even more dangerous. Throughout history, the role of poison tasters was fraught with danger, but the threat wasn't always from external enemies. Some rulers, in their paranoia or desire to test loyalty, would fabricate poison scares. This added a layer of psychological torment to an already perilous job. Poison tasters had to be constantly vigilant, never knowing if the threat was real or a test of their loyalty. These fake threats served multiple purposes. For one, they kept the tasters on their toes, ensuring they never became complacent. A ruler might order a taster to sample food that was perfectly safe, just to see if they would flinch or hesitate. This was a cruel way to gauge the taster's commitment and bravery. It also created an environment of mistrust, where even the tasters couldn't be sure of their own safety. In some cases, these tests were used to weed out disloyal individuals. If a taster refused to sample food, even when assured it was safe, they might be accused of treason. This was a high-stakes game, where the consequences of failure were dire. The tasters had to balance their instincts for self-preservation with their duty, often walking a tightrope between life and death. The psychological impact of these fake threats was profound. It eroded trust between the ruler and the taster, and among the tasters themselves. In such an environment, paranoia could run rampant. Tasters had to be not only brave but also politically savvy, navigating a web of intrigue and deception. The job was never just about tasting food. It was about surviving a labyrinth of power and suspicion. And despite the risks, tasters existed all the way into the 20th century. The practice of employing poison tasters persisted well into the 20th century, a testament to the enduring fears of assassination through food. Even as modern advancements in chemistry and toxicology emerged, the role of the taster remained, particularly in regions where political instability and personal vendettas were rampant. In some cases, these tasters were not just mere servants but highly trained individuals, sometimes even family members or close confidants, chosen for their loyalty and trustworthiness. Their job was to consume a small portion of the ruler's food or drink before it was served, acting as a human shield against potential poisoning attempts. The risks were immense, and the stakes were high. Tasters had to be vigilant, as poisons could be subtle and slow-acting, making detection difficult. Some rulers even employed multiple tasters to ensure that no single individual could be bribed or coerced into allowing poison to pass. The psychological toll on these individuals was significant, as they lived with the constant knowledge that each meal could be their last. Despite this, the role carried a certain prestige. as it was a position of great trust and proximity to power. In some instances, the practice evolved with technology. For example, tasters might use small utensils or cups to sample food and drink, reducing the amount they had to consume. However, the core principle remained the same: someone had to take the risk. The persistence of this practice into the 20th century highlights the deep-seated fears and the lengths to which people would go to protect their leaders. It also underscores the slow pace of change in certain traditions, even in the face of scientific progress. The role of the poison taster was a grim reminder of the vulnerabilities of power and the extreme measures taken to safeguard it. As we wrap up this fascinating journey into the world of poison tasters, let's recap the key points we've uncovered. These brave individuals, often overlooked in history, played a crucial role in protecting their rulers and, by extension, their societies. They were not just tasting food, they were safeguarding the future of their nations. Their stories remind us of the incredible sacrifices made behind the scenes, far from the glamour and power of royal courts. It's easy to imagine ourselves in their shoes, isn't it? The tension, the fear, the unwavering dedication. It's a stark reminder of the human cost of power. These tales of courage and duty resonate with us because they speak to universal values: loyalty, bravery, and the willingness to put others before ourselves. If you found this story as compelling as we did, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below and share your favorite moment or any interesting facts you picked up. And if you're hungry for more historical deep dives, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. We've got plenty more stories like this lined up, each one more captivating than the last. Thanks for joining us on this exploration. Until next time, keep your curiosity alive and your appetite for history insatiable.